We're going to continue sculpting our intermediate forms on our talons and our front limbs, then move on to the head region. I'm going to switch to the pinch tool here. And what I'm doing is I'm able to rotate and continue using the pinch tool while using the 3D connection device. That allows you to continue sculpting while you're actually navigating, and that can save a lot of time during the course of a workday. Got to straighten this area out. Let me switch to a preset here. Let's try and inflate soft. Let's straighten this out first with a move brush. Let's smooth it out. I think I'll try and move further up the limb now. We switch to a inflate clay preset. Try and build up the joint area. Switch back to build clay. I'll do a little bit of work here in the neck region. Wasn't quite sure there while I was getting that splotchy behavior, so I paused recording for a moment to look through my settings, and I found in my brush options panel that I had spacing turned on and the value was a bit too high, so it created that splotchy effect. So I just brought the value down to a very small number. You could also elect to turn spacing off, and it will typically give you a smoother result. What I'm doing now is, in order to create an eye socket and an eyeball, I can either use some of the standard primitives in the models palette, or I can go to a directory that I've already stored models that I've created in the past to repurpose them, and so on. And this really is the beauty of the kit batching toolset in 3D Coat. You can share assets with other artists or just store them and collect them as you go. So what I'm doing now is I'm just going to use a sphere object, or maybe an eye that I've created previously, and while it's still in this preview state, I can use it as a cutting tool. And what I did is I held down the control key while hitting the apply button or the enter key. So that would be control enter, and it will subtract from the layer that you have selected. So after cutting out an eye socket, I'm now trying to create an eyeball, and then after that we'll reuse that eyeball to create an eyelid. So to go ahead and make this eyeball, I need to create a new layer, rename it, hit the enter key or the apply button, and then switch to another tool in order to inspect it. We now need to create a duplicate layer in order to repurpose this for our eyelids. And at this point I have a little bit of a problem, and that is when I created the eyeball I used symmetry, and that created a copy to the opposite side. However, after it's committed, now 3D Coat sees both eyeballs as one object. So to reuse that one eye, I need to delete one of those. I did that by turning symmetry off first and using the cutoff tool, drag selecting around the eyeball that I want to remove, and it's done. Obviously I want to make sure I'm on the right layer when I do that. Let's go back to the transform tool and then click center mass to make sure that we're centered up on our eyeball. I'm going to come over to the body layer and click on the second icon to ghost that layer. I now need to flip the eyeball object 180 degrees so that the smooth part is on the outside. To do that, I'll left mouse click on the rotate widget, then hit the space bar. I can now enter the value numerically. I now want to step out of the transform tool by selecting something else. So I increase the resolution on that a few times. We're now ready to create an opening for our eyelids. I could do that with the cutoff tool, or in this case I'll just use a clay brush with a closed spline. I'm just clicking to lay down some points. Once you're done with the initial creation of your spline, you can hit the escape key and then just go back and click and drag to edit points, or you can click in between points to create new ones. You can also right click on any of the points to change its point type from standard spline, B-spline, and hard edge. I'm going to try a different track here and use the Vox layer tool to create a shell for me. So I'll hit the enter key to create the initial selection, check invert selection and hit apply. And what that did is it created a shell outside of that selection. And it also creates a new layer for you to place that new object in. I'm going to hide the previous layer and switch the new layer to surface mode. I'm going to double click on it and rename it Banshee Eyelid. This would probably be a good object to use for kit bashing, where we can repurpose it in other projects by storing it in the models palette. So I'm going to select the Banshee directory that I've already created and just drag select that layer directly into the models palette. I can change the decimation level before I commit this. Hit OK. And you see 3D Coat creates the new thumbnail for me. To reuse this in another project, all I need to do is look up the object and just click on it, and it will bring it right into the viewport. Turn symmetry back on. And turn show symmetry plane, and so it's a little bit out of whack. In order to correct that, I need to come over to the layer, right click and choose to global space, and that will reset it to world orientation. So in order to fix this little divot that we have here where we rotated the eye, I'm just going to use a polish preset. Just smooth that out a little bit. This won't even be seen by the camera, so it's really not much to even worry about. Okay. The next thing we need to do is create a mirrored copy. So with symmetry turned on, all I need to do is hold down the shift key, and I can just lightly tap one side to tell 3D Coat which to copy from, and then click the sim copy icon. In some cases you may opt to keep this separate from the body, but in this case we're going to merge it by shift click and dragging over the top of the body layer. While this is calculating, I just want to mention that I ended up having to pause the recording because it was taking a while to calculate, and it largely depends on the size of your mesh, but I'll just point out something to keep in mind. whenever you're merging objects together, try, if it's feasible, to switch to voxel mode on both layers first, because that's the optimal way of merging or doing Boolean type operations in 3D Coat. When you're working with surface mode, it does a pretty good job sometimes, but there are other times where you'll wait for a few minutes and end up getting some kind of self-intersection error, and you really don't want to do that. What I'm doing now is I'm resampling the body layer so that it has enough resolution to keep the sharp, crisp edges of the eyelids when I merge the two together, because the incoming layer will adopt the resolution and the attributes of the host layer. So for example, the eyelid layer is going to take on the resolution of the body layer. What I did here is I paused and I used the split tool in order to separate the head and neck area from the rest of the body, and that's just to try and optimize my scene while I'm working, because as you'll see here, when I cache the body layer, it's going to save me about 2 or 3 gigabytes of memory usage just while we're working in the head and neck area. So it did make a lot of sense to jack up the resolution on the entire body while we're working in this particular area. As you can see, it dropped from about 8 gigabytes to 6 gigabytes of usage. Let's go ahead and wrap it up in this video, and we're going to pick up in the next one working in the head and the neck region. So stay tuned, and thank you for watching.